Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Mike Levine. I'm the Executive Director of the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, and I want to welcome you to the Learning at Home Forum. We are so delighted that you all have come from far corners of the United States and some of you internationally to be here with us in New York, and otherwise known as the Ice Bowl. As leaders in different sectors, from media production to research, to educational practice, to policy and philanthropy, you'll note that your table mates, and I want to tell you, those of you in the back of the nice seat, these are fine. Come on up, come on down, as they say in the Price is Right. You'll know that your table mates may very well have very different expertise than your own, and that's wholly intentional on our part. We'll be using our multi-sector-ness today as a real strength in responding to the new study. We're especially grateful to Vicky Rideout, who's authored, I think, a very timely and provocative report that's inspired this convening, and of course to our generous funders, the Bezos Family Foundation, Isaac Simons Foundation, the Life Center, and AARP. I want to also especially thank Dr. Charlotte Frank of McGraw-Hill for providing this lovely space. Thank you. And just so that I make sure that I do this, because it's really so important to us as a small team, let me recognize the team at the center, led by Lori Takeuchi, Michelle Miller, Captain G, Tyler Julie Katrina, Sarah Core, and Jason Yip, and Brianna Pressey, and Anna Lee, and Sam Zeltic. Everybody's really contributed to this. It really takes a big effort, you all know, to carry off a forum with high standards. The study released today and the conversation we have planned will bring new attention, I think, to the enduring value that parents place on learning in a digital age, and hopefully it'll lead us to identify priorities that deserve national action now. An important backdrop for this conversation is our increasingly robust understanding about child development and the positive life trajectories, which are launched through optimal conditions in the early years. Breakthroughs, many of you have been part of these, in scientific research on children's brain and socio-emotional development, as well as policies that promote early intervention in family strengthening, increasingly point to the first decade of life, especially the first 5 years of life, and laying a strong pathway for all that follows. So, important as the national attention and large investment in school reform is, the premise of our conversation today is that we may be missing some key ingredients and opportunities to build a stronger foundation. So let's take a close look at just how little time is spent by America's young children in formal learning environments. This slide from the Life Center is one of my favorites. It documents that less than 20% of all waking hours are spent in formal learning over a lifetime, and even less than that, obviously, in the preschool years. Of course, our national investments don't align to this chart. One kind of logical conclusion is encouraging positive interactions with caring adults and with high quality content must command greater attention before a child enters school. The research work that we're discussing today then begins with a focus on learning in the home. At the Cooney Center, we're documenting the evolving influences on family development in the digital age. By starting with parents and their children's changing routines around media consumption, we're aiming to modernize my mentor, Yuri Bronfenberger's pioneering research, as documented in this chart. No, it doesn't come from my dissertation. So Yuri pointed out that there's a family ecological system, and we're interested in tracking the different influences that shape a child's life course, including parent-child interactions, role of peers, finding ways to bridge formal and informal learning, and galvanizing really important needed changes in how leaders like all of you support the early and most formative years. Added to the real consensus in the scientific community about the importance of early interactions and the value of high-quality out-of-school experiences for older kids, many policymakers and journalists you may have noted recently are taking on the primacy of parental engagement in driving educational choices. For example, many of you may have read Tom Friedman's New York Times column this last Sunday, citing our painful slump in international achievement. He cited it as a clarion call for much more vigorous involvement of parents in setting higher educational goals. Last week, the President and Congress approved a major expansion of Head Start and other early learning programs, and recently the Department of Education proposed doubling national funding for family engagement activities. Education Secretary Arnie Duncan, in announcing new plans to support family engagement, said, "Parents will always be a child's first and most important teacher, but to really help our kids, we have to change expectations about how hard they should work and what kinds of experiences they have right from the start." The increased national dialogue on early learning and engaged parenting is, in my view, and I'm sure many of you, welcome news. It often falls short, however, in considering what I think is one of the most powerful decisions parents can and do make: how to develop a balanced approach to the rapidly increasing media choices that are now available anytime, anywhere to children at earlier and earlier ages. At the Cooney Center, we're prioritizing 3 key issue clusters that we think deserve more attention and which I hope we will be discussing throughout the day. First, we need new public awareness, industry incentives, and commonly understood measures to improve media quality linked to educational outcomes and healthy development. Today, we will begin to drill into what we know about parental perceptions of media of educational value. Second, we need a much deeper and more precise understanding of the evolving nature of family interactions with media. That is, what are the best opportunities and situations for families to learn and play together or alone with media? Can we design better products and educational models to allow the family crucible to do more? And third, and perhaps most importantly, we need to better understand ethnocultural diversity in the new media environment and take actions to promote equity. Today, I hope we can explore what are the right incentives to promote new partnerships for equity and more culturally competent media products. To help propel action, of course, we need to know more. We know some. And we need to work across discipline as a rule, not an exception. Inspired by the need for new partnerships in the work of scholars in the fields of child development, communications, and the learning sciences, we have organized an exciting alliance that will be releasing studies like this one, educational resources and materials through the Families and Media Project, or FAM. The partners in the new project span a wide range of organizations and disciplinary perspectives. We're delighted to be able to connect leading scholars and media experts from across the country, as you see in the slide, and to be working with so many of the early learning and literacy organizations here today. We're so pleased to be working closely with ARP, Common Sense Media, National Center for Families Learning, New America, PBS, Fred Rogers, the list goes on, CPP. Leaders from each of these institutions are here today. And finally, our related studies. The national survey released today, a group of regional studies, and a forthcoming longitudinal impact study are intended to help inform policy, influence the design of media-based interventions, as I suggested, and perhaps most importantly, provide needed, timely resources for parents and educators to increase the amount of quality interaction around media. As the findings of the national study released today make clear, the influence of media on family life is here to stay. We announced the center in this building almost exactly 6 years ago. Any of you here for that? It's nice to be back. It's been our intention, and I hope that we've lived up to some of that potential, to serve as a field builder, an open source research and dissemination agent, and a collaboration hub. Working together, we firmly hope that educators, policymakers, and media designers will gain needed insights and deploy digital technologies in increasingly powerful ways. To get our forum rolling, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Vicky Rideout, the author of Learning at Home, which each of you have at your places. Vicky's well known to most of you as a leading expert on children's health, media use, and policy. But even more central to her remarkable track record, in my view, has been her devotion to developing new forms of evidence in areas often neglected in the public discourse. Her work is driven by the highest standards of excellence, be it her national survey, studies, public engagement work, or tireless advocacy for children and families. Vicki will share the new survey report and reflect on some possible implications. Her remarks will lead off a highly interactive forum, which will be led by Amy Jordan of the University of Pennsylvania's Edinburgh School of Communications, and Lisa Guernsey, who leads New America's Early Education Initiative. They and our discussion provocateurs have been a delight to work with, and I must thank them all in advance for the brilliant work they will do with us today. But now, Vicki, we're all eager to hear about how parents describe learning with media at home. Please recognize Vicky Rideout.
you, Michael, and thank you all for being here. As a Californian, I'm just totally impressed that you braved this weather and leave your homes at all. This is a really exciting study for me to share with you. I believe that this is the first time that anybody has tried to measure on a national level what proportion of children's screen time is devoted to educational content. And so that was one of the purposes of this study. We wanted to look at that proportion by platform. So what is it for television? What is it for computers? What is it for mobile media? And then also by other demographic factors, so age and gender and socioeconomic status. Another purpose for the study was to look in detail at which platforms parents think their kids are learning the most from and which subjects they're learning the most about. We also wanted to measure joint media engagement, that is, how much time parents and kids are engaging with media together, and again, look at that across platforms, and also to document patterns of reading and e-reading. So those are the purposes of the study. We had a robust sample. We had more than 1,500 parents, including about 300 Black and more than 600 Latino parents, nearly 700. They all reported on the media use habits of a focal child in the 2 to 10-year-old age range. We used an online probability-based sample, which is called the knowledge sample, fielded by JFK Research Company. I mentioned that this is the first study that I know of to actually try to document the portion of children's screen time that is educational or devoted to educational content. Of course, there's a lot of room for differences of opinion as to exactly what media products are educational and which aren't. And I can imagine we would have a robust debate in this room about certain titles. So even among experts, there's a lot of room for disagreement and debate and discussion. In this study, the method we used was to get parents' assessments of what they felt, their judgments of what they felt was, which of their children's screen time was educational and which was not. And as well, we rely on parents to tell us how much they think their child has learned. So this is not a study that has an objective measure. We don't have a series of criteria and coding all of the content and so on. We gave parents a definition of educational content, which you can see up here on the screen. It is obviously a broad and roomy definition. We did that on purpose. It's the definition that the Cooney Center believes is an accurate one. It is also one that is a generous definition. That's just something to keep in mind as we evaluate what we think of, what we can learn from these data. Parents may very well overestimate or underestimate how much of their children's screen time is educational. But I thought I would give you a sense for how parents assess the educational content of a couple of familiar properties, so that you have a feeling for what they do and don't consider educational. So this slide indicates the percent of parents who say each TV show is very educational. So you can see a majority, nearly 6 in 10, say Sesame Street is very educational, but it's not everybody, so this is not a bunch of pushover parents here. I mean, they're being judgmental, and they're, so it's about a third for Dora, a fourth for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and 2% for SpongeBob. So maybe you want to take the findings with at least 2% grains of salt. So anyway, this is just to give you a sense as you evaluate the findings of, this is what where parents are coming from. I wanted to start by saying that I think there is a lot of really good news for the educational media community in these findings. Starting with the fact that a large proportion of 2 to 10-year-olds are regular, frequent users of educational media. You guys are reaching a large audience on an ongoing basis. It's a total of 80% of kids who are at least weekly users of some kind of educational media, and a third who are doing it every day. So I think that's really good news, a large audience on a consistent basis. Another good piece of news is that parents tell us that their children are in fact learning from educational media. Among parents whose kids are weekly users, these are the percent who say their child has learned about each subject. And this is only the percent who say their child has learned a lot. So we're not including the sums here. And I think these are pretty encouraging results. As you can see, according to their parents, kids are most likely to be gaining knowledge about cognitive skills from educational media, and then reading and vocabulary and math, with some other subjects falling a little further behind. One thing we thought was interesting was this here with science kind of falling so much lower than some of the other subjects. And that may be something that some of you here may have some insights about, and hopefully in the discussion we can maybe return to that and see what might be behind that. But altogether, it's a majority who say their child has learned a lot from educational media. So again, a really good piece of news. Another piece of good news in my view is that many parents report that their children are extending their learning from media off into the real world through actions and so on. So their kids are asking to do a project based on something they saw in educational media. They're asking their parent questions. They're engaging in imaginative play based on educational media. Sometimes even teaching the parent something the parent didn't know themselves based on what the child has learned in educational media. And again, it's a majority who do that often. Again, we're not including the sometimes here. So I think really a lot of good news in this survey for this community. Now for some of the more challenging news. The first item, and it's not a big surprise, I know, to anybody in this room, but there's some good documentation here for it, is that the proportion of children's screen time that's devoted to educational content drops way off once kids get out of that 2 to 4-year-old age range. I know we knew it happens by the time they get in the 8 to 10-year-old age range, but this research is showing it happening even in the 5 to 7-year-old age range, and it's a pretty big drop-off. What's most concerning to me personally about this drop-off in educational media is that it occurs at the same time that screen use overall is going up. So you have this combination of screen media use goes up from about 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours a day. The proportion that's educational drops way off from more than 3/4 of screen time among the young group down to about 1/4 of screen time among the older group. And so the net result is an actual decrease in the amount of time that's spent with educational media. Now you can also say, look, even among the 8 to 10-year-olds, they're spending 42 minutes a day with educational media, which I do think is a positive finding. But it's kind of that combination there that I think is a challenge for us. And don't forget, we have that nice broad roomy definition of educational media, and maybe some of you were thinking, I bet parents are overestimating how much time their kids are spending with educational media because they want to convince themselves that their kids are in good shape and they're being good parents. If that's the case, then we have even more reason to be concerned about the low proportion of screen time that's educational for the older kids. Another finding that stood out as a bit of a challenge to me was that mobile still is lagging pretty far behind TV in terms of how much kids are using it for educational purposes and how much they're learning from it. So first of all, a smaller proportion of the time that kids spend with mobile is devoted to content that their parents consider educational. Again, parents may or may not have an accurate assessment of that, and that's something that I hope maybe we can talk about. I think there's reasons to believe they may have a better judgment about TV content than mobile because they can see it more easily. They're watching what their kids are watching, maybe because their kids are using mobile in smaller bursts. Their parents aren't fully grasping how educational it is. But I do think it's an issue that, parents say that more than half of the TV their kids watch is educational, but only about 1/3 of the mobile. So what that ends up meaning is that children spend much less time with educational content on mobile devices than they do on educational TV, much less. So it's an average of 42 minutes a day with educational television and 5 minutes a day with educational content on mobile devices. So the potential of mobile is not being tapped yet. We've been at it a lot longer with television, so that can be part of it, but we're not there yet. Another way that we're seeing mobile lag behind is that even parents whose kids are using educational content on mobile devices on a regular basis, that is at least weekly, are telling us their kids are learning less from mobile than from television. So parents, rightly or wrongly, are less likely to attribute learning to the educational content their kids are doing on mobile devices than television. So these are the percent who say their child has learned a lot about at least one of those subjects that we asked them about from the educational activities on these platforms. You probably remember this slide here where we showed, this is the slide I showed you just a minute ago, of what percent of kids have learned a lot about any one of these subjects from any of the platforms that they use. Well, for each one of these subject areas, parents were most likely to say their child had learned from television than from any other platform, except for math. That they said they were most likely to learn from the computer. And for each one of these subjects, they were least likely to say their child had learned from mobile, even behind educational video games. So that's where I'm seeing some red flags here to say, I don't think mobile is fully tapping its potential, or else parents aren't understanding the impact that it's having. And again, that's just among the parents whose kids are using educational content on mobile. Okay, another finding that seems to me to be a bit of a challenge for our community concerns how parents find the educational media that their kids use. You can see in this chart the different ways that parents said they're finding educational media. And I guess what leapt out to me when I looked at this was that it just doesn't feel like that intentional of a process, and that might be a function of these were the options that we gave parents. But as I look at this, I say, gosh, I wish it was more than 20% who were checking for reviews and ratings, whether in papers or online or other resources. We want it to be a little more intentional and mindful than that. So again, that might be another topic for us to talk about in the discussion. Another interesting aspect of the findings, and in this case I'm not really sure whether we've got positive, negative, or something in between, has to do with socioeconomic status. So I think a really important issue for the educational media community, at least certainly the nonprofit wing of the educational media community, is that there are still a lot of lower income kids who do not have access to many of the platforms on which we deliver educational content to them. And as you can see here, there is one universal platform, and that is broadcast television. But even when you get to cable, for the lower income kids, I mean, it's like a 60-40 split. A lot of them don't even have cable. And that's certainly the case also with high-speed internet and smartphones. And when you get to tablets, which is, such a delightful platform for creating educational content, we're missing 3/4 of the lowest income kids. On the other hand, we also found that low-income kids use more educational media, at least according to their parents, than higher income kids. They're more frequent users of it. So this chart shows you, for the percent who are daily users of some type of educational media, it's 1/4 of the kids from higher income families, but it's 43% of the kids from the lower income families. It's mostly TV, but maybe this means we're reaching the target audience, the kids who need more educational opportunities and stimulus in the home in a better way. I think part of what's going on there is just that the lower income kids spend more time with screen media. So it's about an hour a day more than kids in upper income families. So of course more of it is educational. In addition, lower income parents are more likely than higher income parents to label the same content as educational. Okay, so if you ask them that question, how educational is Sesame Street, how educational is Dora the Explorer, Mickey Mouse, etc., you'll get higher ratings of educational from the lower income parents than from the upper income parents. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not really sure what the findings are from the study. I mean, it may be that we're doing a good job of reaching the kids most in need, but it may be that they're just spending more time with screen media, or that their parents have a different view of the educational value of media. Next, there were a couple of intriguing findings about when we looked at the data by race and ethnicity. When we asked parents how much their children have learned from the educational media that they use. There's a pretty interesting split. And across almost every subject area and every platform, the Black parents were the most likely, and the Hispanic parents were the least likely to say that their child had learned from media. The detailed table is in the report because we have this matrix of like 7 topics and 4 platforms, so you can see that all in there. But I put up one example for you here, and this is the percent who say their child has learned a lot or some about math from their educational activities on the computer. And it's a pretty pronounced difference here. And this is sort of the type of difference that we saw reflected in all of the data. Now, at the same time, the Hispanic parents and Hispanic Latino parents were way more likely than other parents to say that they were looking for more information on how to find good quality educational media for their kids. So to me, there's some kind of red flag here that perhaps the educational media community is not doing as good a job as we would like to in reaching the increasingly diverse Hispanic Latino community and maybe getting information to them about what products are available. Okay, my last 2 topics, joint media engagement and e-reading. There has been a fair amount of research indicating that having parents and kids use media together in an active and engaged way enhances the benefit of educational media for kids. And so we wanted to measure how much of that is actually happening. So you can see the results up here. And again, television is the medium that is most likely to be used together by parents and kids. And mobile, video games, computers, less so. But still a fair amount of it going on. Maybe it's about a quarter of the time that kids are using mobile, video games, or computers, the parent is using it with them. Finally, e-reading. We wanted to try to actually document how much time kids are spending reading on electronic devices versus in print. And these are the results among all 2 to 10-year-olds here, that it's an average of about 5 minutes a day now per kid that occurs on e-reading and close to half an hour for print. Now, of course, part of this disparity has to do with not all kids have an e-reading platform in their home. It's about 62% total who do have some kind of electronic platform at home, either a dedicated e-reader or a tablet device. This pie chart here on the left of your screen shows you, if you look at the blue, it's about 38% of kids don't have any kind of e-reading platform at home, so they couldn't do it even if they wanted to. The green at the bottom, close to a third who have an e-reading platform and the child uses it. Then there's this other interesting group that have an e-reading device, but they don't use it. And so we asked those parents why their child doesn't do it, that 32%, and that's what's on the right-hand side of the screen there. And you can see that some of the parents say, you know, the child's too young for e-reading. A lot of them are just saying they just prefer the experience of print, and they don't want to have their child be spending more time with screens than necessary. So that concludes my presentation of the data. But before I sit down, I just want to offer a couple of concluding remarks. The purpose of this research is to help shine a light on something that I know we all consider really important, and that is the use of media as an informal educational platform in the home. And the point of today is for all of you who are the content creators, who are the educators, who are the media company executives, to have a few hours to be able to dig through these data and really see, is there something in here that can help inform the work that you do? Is there something in here that can help you do an even better job of what you do? We're not here to say that all media should be educational. Okay, 100% was not the proportion we were looking to find. There's obviously a big place for media that is just entertaining, that's about fun, that's about relaxation, that's about art. But this community, all of us, is here because we saw an opportunity, starting with Joan Ganz Cooney some 44 years ago, to take advantage of this incredible platform as a way of entertaining and educating kids at the same time, and as a way of contributing to a goal that I know we all believe in our guts is one of the most important that our society faces, and that is helping to level and decrease the achievement gap among kids, contributing to equal educational opportunity, and enriching the lives of young children. So that is the part of the equation that we're going to focus on today. So how can we boost the proportion of screen time that is devoted to educational content among older children? These are some of the questions that I'm hoping we can all talk about here today. And the format, as you can see, there's no panel up here. So every person here has so much to contribute that we want this to be a true discussion. So ask any questions you have, make any comments. Nobody's going to say to you, try to phrase that as a question. We want to hear your comments if you want to make a comment, if you have a thought. These are my thoughts on what some of the important topics are for us to talk about. How do we boost educational media use among older children? How do we reach the low-income children who are most in need? How can we do a better job of creating compelling mobile content? How can we reach even more parents than we already are with the information and resources that are already even available to them about how to choose good quality educational media for kids? Are we creating content that's meeting the needs of the increasingly diverse Hispanic community? And are we doing the best that we can to encourage high quality educational content? So whatever else is on your minds as well will be the subject for conversation today. I just want to say thank you for your work. Thank you for your attention, your presence here today. And I need to say a huge thank you to everybody at the Cooney Center who worked so hard to bring this project together, from Catherine, Sadak, Michelle, Lily, colleagues at Sesame, who were such great help, including Jody, Jen, June. And of course, especially, I want to thank Michael and Lori for giving me the opportunity to work with you guys on this study. It has really been a privilege and a fantastic opportunity. So thank you. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mike.